Uhuru, everybody. Uhuru, hopefully you can all hear me. Actually, I'm gonna get on my headphones. Very, very excited for tonight's web show. So come on in the room. We are on Zoom. Come in the Zoom room. We are also on YouTube and Facebook. So go ahead and share those live streams and invite all your friends to tune in. And I am so excited to be here tonight. So without further ado, welcome to the Uru Solidarity Movement Midwest Region's tour event for our fabulous campaign, Make Wall Street Pay Reparations. Tonight, we're showing you what this campaign looks like in the Midwest with the theme, the Delmar Divide, Wall Street versus Black Power. My name is Mckee, and I'm a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee and its mass organization, the Uru Solidarity Movement. I am so proud to be part of this incredible organization. I serve as the Midwest Regional Organizer and the chair of our local St. Louis branch of the Uru Solidarity Movement. And I also volunteer on the social media team for the Black Power Blueprint, a dynamic Black-led self-determination project right here in St. Louis, which we will hear about in more detail tonight. So, what is the Uhuru Solidarity Movement for those who don't know, or this is your first event with us? We are the reparations organization for white people in solidarity with Black liberation under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, a revolutionary party of the African working class formed in 1972 to complete the Black Revolution of the 60s. We are called in the Solidarity Movement to go into the white community and win solidarity with Black power and reparations. And also, Uhuru is a Swahili word that means freedom, and we are called on to use this phrase to keep African freedom on our minds 24/7. I want to appreciate and welcome everyone who's here tonight. I'm sure that many of you are here because you see what is happening in the world today, the brutal murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others, and the incredible African uprising happening not just in Minneapolis, but all around the world. And so I just really excited that you are here tonight to hear real solutions for how we can overturn this vicious system that is committing genocide against the Black community. I want to let you know that if you have questions or comments, we welcome those, and we want you to write that in the chat or in the comments on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll have time for discussion during the Q&A at the end. So I'm gonna make a few salutes before we get started. First, I want to salute our leadership, the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omala Yeshitela. The chairman is the founder of the Uhuru Movement, and the reason that we're here tonight has been fighting for this incredible movement to be where it's at today for decades, and has devoted his entire life to the liberation of African people. I also want to salute Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela, who leads all the economic work of the African People's Socialist Party, including the Black Power Blueprint. And I want to salute our keynote speaker tonight, to Charo Masimba, who is the director of the Black Power Blueprint and who fights tirelessly to bring self-determination to the African community. And of course, I want to salute my direct leadership, Chairwoman Penny Hess, who is the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, who will be speaking tonight, and the chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, Jesse Neville, who will be opening up tonight's panel by introducing our campaign to make Wall Street pay reparations. So now I'd like to turn it over to Comrade Chair Jesse Uhuru.
Uhuru, KC, and everybody who's tuning in tonight for this incredible event, the Delmar Divide, Wall Street versus Black Power. I just really want to join Comrade KC in saluting the speakers that are about to be addressing us tonight, including to Charo Masimba of the African People's Socialist Party and the brilliant organizer and leader within the party in St. Louis, who heads up the economic development, who is the economic development director of the Black Power Blueprint under the leadership of Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela. I want to salute to Charo and Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela the incredible architect of the Black Power Blueprint. And I also want to join in saluting Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee, my direct leadership, who has functioned as an example of white solidarity with Black power under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela since 1976, when Chairman Omali Yeshitela formed the African People's Solidarity Committee as the way to extend the struggle for African liberation and Black power into the heart of the parasitic white oppressor nation society. Penny Hess heard the call in 1976 and has carried out that work ever since. And I want to finally, last but not least, and most above all, salute our chairman, Omali Yeshitela, the founder and leader of the Uhuru Movement, whose political theory and analysis and worldview and organization of African internationalism is what is responsible for everything that I'm about to say and everything that you will be hearing in this event tonight. And it is a great honor to be a member of an organization formed by, created by, accountable to, and led by the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And that organization is the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. As Casey said, Uhuru means freedom in Swahili, and solidarity is solidarity with the struggle of African people for Uhuru, for freedom, whether it's Africans in this country or around the world where African people have been dispersed and are colonized and oppressed. And the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, if you are not already a member of this organization, we want to recruit you. We want you to join this organization before the event tonight is over. And I expect that you will if you're not already a member, because I think I can say without exaggeration that your life will be changed by the event that you have made a decision to attend tonight. And I applaud you for making that decision. I think you could not have made a better decision with what to do with your Thursday night or Thursday afternoon than to spend it here with the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and the African People's Socialist Party. Our first principle of unity is that we are under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. We are not an organization of good white people who came together to read about our fragility and privilege and look for ways that we can unlearn the ideas in our heads or use our privilege to affect change or something like that. We are an organization that was created by the African People's Socialist Party. They created us. We did not choose the correct path for white people. They created that path. They created the stance of solidarity with African liberation that now we have the opportunity and the honor to take. Number two, we organize in the white community for reparations to African people. We organize other white people. We don't go into colonized communities, African and Mexican communities, to try to organize African people. They don't need us to do that. They're organizing themselves for liberation. Our job is to take responsibility for our people, for our community, for the fact that everything we have has come at the expense of the assault on Africa, the enslavement and oppression and genocide against African and indigenous people for hundreds of years. And finally, our third principle of unity, we stand in solidarity with African self-determination. African people have the right to lead their own struggle for national liberation. And I want to also salute Casey Mckee and the entire Midwest region of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement for hosting this event tonight. And I wanted to take a few minutes before we go into this incredible program and our amazing speakers to talk about the campaign, Make Wall Street Pay Reparations. This is a campaign that goes for the jugular vein of parasitic capitalism, this horrific social system that dominates the planet Earth and which we despise. It is a campaign that goes to the heart of a system built on the enslavement of African people and the genocide against the indigenous people of this land and the theft of their land. When you look at the wealth of white society and the ruling class, whether it's the banks, whether it's the universities, whether it's the insurance companies, whether it's the media and the entertainment industry or the medical system or any other aspect of life, follow the money. Follow the money all the way through the pages of history. You will find yourself in a slave plantation in the South or on the auction block in New York where the largest slave market was held. You will find yourself at the origins of the wealth of capitalism in America and Europe, which is the enslavement of African people and the theft of this land from the indigenous people and the genocide committed against them. That is the reality that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has exposed the basis for the two realities you see in the world, in which it is normal to take for granted that African people would live in poverty and die at the hands of the police, while white people have a totally different experience. That is why the African People's Socialist Party is fighting for power and liberation for Africa and African people everywhere, for the resources of Africa to benefit African people themselves. And at a time when the resistance of African people, as manifest by the heroic rebellions that have engulfed the planet after the brutal murder of George Floyd by the Minneapolis cops, this resistance has forced the moneyed sector of the white population, including corporations and businesses, to acknowledge the colonial contradiction and to do it in their own opportunist way. But the point is, our work as the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is to go into white society to win reparations as a socialist, revolutionary, anti-capitalist demand. That is still the essential question that we must take on today. In fact, it is more urgent and critical now than ever before. That's why Chairman Omali Yeshitela called upon the Solidarity Movement under the party's leadership to wage a campaign to target the moneyed sector for reparations to African people. This campaign is not called Occupy Wall Street. This campaign is not built around a struggle to reform capitalism in order to make it nicer to us. This campaign does not revolve around a false assumption that we are the 99%, when in reality, we are a minority of the world population living off the resources stolen from the majority. This campaign does not revolve around a struggle to recapture our student loan debt or restore for us the promise of an American dream that our parents and grandparents took for granted. No, this is not that. This is something very different. This campaign is one that goes to the very essence of this foul and putrid world economy resting on a bloody foundation of slavery and genocide. This campaign is called Make Wall Street Pay Reparations. And it is a campaign that we are enlisted by our leadership in the African People's Socialist Party to carry out as a genuine form of class struggle as white people. That for us, the real essence of class struggle is in solidarity with the anti-colonial struggle. For us, real class struggle begins the moment we divorce ourselves from the white ruling class who have slaughtered and stolen for our benefit. We reject them, we turn our backs on them, and we demand of them that they pay the ultimate price of reparations to African people. They have to pay for their crimes, for profiting from the enslavement, for profiting and financing the colonial prison system, for profiting from their involvement in drug trafficking that imposed a drug economy, an illegal drug economy on the African community, for funding the police departments throughout this country, for funding the purchase of military-grade weapons used by the police to torment and torture and kill African people, for profiting off of the COVID-19 crisis while the colonial virus, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela calls it, kills African and indigenous people at genocidal rates. They have to pay. And now so many of them are coming forward. Bank of America, they came forward with this big statement that they're going to be giving $1 billion towards racial equality work. JP Morgan, the CEO, knelt down on one knee in front of the Chase Bank vault to show his solidarity with the oppressed people. And I don't think that it's an accident that within hours of the heroic uprisings in Minneapolis, which saw numerous banks torched and reduced to ash, that these CEOs would come forward waving Black Lives Matter signs and red, black, and green flags, desperately pleading with the public to recognize them as genuine allies and champions of Black freedom. What we are doing with this campaign, which has, by the way, already elicited mainstream media attention in financial elite journals like Business Insider, is we are saying to them that a simple apology and a measly little chunk of change thrown to your charity of choice is not going to douse the flames of the people's resistance. The African community is demanding reparations. The African People's Socialist Party is demanding reparations. And we, as an organization of the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, under its leadership, unite with their struggle for reparations. And we are going to do our part to make the lives of Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan and his cabal of parasites a living hell. they will be made to pay reparations to African people. And we mean reparations to the Black Power blueprint. You're going to find out about that tonight. Because reparations, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela has so eloquently stated, must be something that repairs the damage that they have caused, that supports the anti-colonial economic empowerment of African people themselves, that negates the power of the banks over the lives of the oppressed. So you're watching this event tonight. You came here not because you wanted to consume information and be able to win debates on social media, although you will become better at doing that as a result of this event. You came here because you want to be part of changing the world. When the protests end, when the cameras leave, you want to stay and you want to fight and you want to be involved in changing this reality that affects the vast majority of the people on the planet Earth. So we call on you to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Join, become a member. We have to be organized. We have to be organized under the leadership of the African Revolution. uhurusolidarity.org/join. Go there and join tonight, because at the end of this event, we're going to read off all the names of the people who have joined. So there's no point when it's too early to go there and join and become a member of this incredible and unique organization. And beyond just joining USM, join this campaign. We're going to be starting on July 18th, weekly actions in cities across the United States, targeting Bank of America with the demand for reparations to African people. We want to harass them. We want to haunt them, as the chairman says, relentlessly, unforgivingly, uncompromisingly, and force them to have to meet this demand of reparations to the Black Power blueprint. So we have a lot of work to do. We're going to be doing weekly actions, and we're going to be having actions culminating in a national day of action on September 18th, right there in the belly of the beast at Wall Street in New York, to shut down Wall Street in New York City. We call on you to join, make this happen, build this campaign in your city, and get ready for the action in September in New York to shut down Wall Street and make them pay reparations to African people. So if you're interested in getting involved, you're going to hear more about how you can do that tonight. You can go to uhurusolidarity.org/volunteer and sign up with us, and come to our a meeting tomorrow night at 4 p.m. Eastern, where we're going to be discussing the weekly actions that are going to be starting on July 18th. So I want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela. I want to salute Deputy Chair Onizane Yeshitela, to Charo Masimba, Chairwoman Penny Hess, the entire African People's Socialist Party, and all of you for being here tonight and for making the incredible decision to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, white solidarity with Black power, make Wall Street pay reparations. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Jesse, thank you so much. I totally unite with that overview, and I want to join in the call for white people to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And you'll see tonight why you should, if you haven't yet. There's a lot of articles going around that say things like 50 things white people should be doing for racial justice. And none of them mention that the number one thing we should do, the bottom line thing, is joining the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And why? Because it was created specifically by the Black Liberation Movement to make a place for us to stand with this struggle. We no longer have to ask, what do I do? What should we do right now to rectify this horrible reality where we clearly have a different reality than Black people in this country and around the world? This is the solution. So join, and support this work and become active. So now it is my honor to introduce our first speaker tonight, the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess. Penny has been a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, or APSC, since its founding in 1976 by the African People's Socialist Party, and has been working under the leadership of the party to carry out Chairman Omali Yeshitela's brilliant strategy of organizing members of the colonizer nation, aka white people, to break our allegiance to this system and our own ruling class and Wall Street, and to instead unite in principled solidarity with the African Revolution. Penny was actually the first white person to become a revolutionary African internationalist by joining APSC and taking up the call to build the movement for white reparations to African people as an anti-colonial demand. She's also the author of the book, Overturning the Culture of Violence. which I recommend for everybody to get, written under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. So without further ado, please welcome Chairwoman Penny Hess. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, KC. And I really want to salute that incredible presentation by Comrade Jesse. If I could, I would join all over again. That was very inspiring, and I can't agree more on the importance of everybody that's here tonight hearing this message and this understanding for the first time that we must take action. We cannot be consumers of information, that what we see in the world today requires that we cannot leave the world as it is. And we have a particular responsibility that is called on us by the African Revolution to go back into the belly of the beast, to organize everybody else that's there, our friends, our family, our churches, our schools, to jump off this pedestal on the backs of African, indigenous, and oppressed peoples on the planet Earth, join humanity and be part of solving the problems created by this vicious system, and be part of taking on our responsibility to pay reparations, rectify and repair the damage, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela has said, and join the future of humanity. So it is really an honor to be here tonight, to be talking to you. I want to also begin by saluting our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and I want to make it clear that we salute the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is the leader of the African Revolution. He is the leader of the vanguard party, the African People's Socialist Party, which organizes African people all around the world, wherever they have been forcibly dispersed, to fight, to liberate, to be organized, to liberate Africa, and for the return of all of Africa's stolen wealth and stolen labor. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela has been fighting this fight for over 50 years, and you can still see him. You can go to his page, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, on Facebook. He has many events during the week. He has an incredible political education every Sunday morning at 8 o'clock Eastern, which is so powerful to understand these ideas that the chairman calls as political theory of African internationalism. I also want to salute Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela, who is our leadership, who is the coordinator of the Black Power Blueprint, literally the architect of it here in St. Louis, but also the coordinator of over 50 institutions of dual and contending power, political and economic power in the hands of the African working class, self-determination, dual power that are part of the African People's Socialist Party. So it is an incredible honor to work under Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela, a fierce fighter for the liberation of African people, and also to be able to welcome tonight and to be under the leadership of Charo Masimba, who is a leader, an incredible leader, the economic development coordinator of the Black Power Blueprint here on the ground in St. Louis, where I am, a brilliant, an amazing organizer, theoretician, speaker, for the African People's Socialist Party here, and worker. So it is a great honor to be here tonight and to say, yes, I am in St. Louis, and we're talking about this money sector. We're talking about Wall Street. We're talking about the 1%, the wealthy here in St. Louis, and what the conditions are. And this is the city where 6 years ago, Michael Brown was murdered brutally by the police while he was walking down the street near his home in Ferguson, which is a little suburb just on the north side of St. Louis, not very far from where the Uhuru House is today at 4101 West Florissant, and as part of the Black Power Blueprint. And he was murdered. It was an August day. his body was brutally left out in the sun for over 4 hours, and it sparked an incredible rebellion, resistance of the African working class here. And what we saw recently in Minneapolis with the brutal police murder of George Floyd is a continuation of the same colonial violence that is perpetrated against African people 3 times a day inside this country. It is not unusual, but the resistance that we have seen in this period, the sustained resistance led by the African working class, that has exposed all of the colonial contradictions, all of the deepest questions of why America is the way it is and how things got to be the way they are right now, why there is this Delmar divide, why there is wealth in the white community, poverty in the African community, everywhere. And the Delmar divide refers to a particular situation here in St. Louis where you cross Delmar Boulevard, and on one side are mansions and gated communities, and on the other side is incredible poverty, the poverty of the north side of St. Louis, the African community. So it represents this colonial reality here in St. Louis and elsewhere. And I do, want to say again, this is a time when we must get organized, that the cameras will leave, that perhaps at some point the resistance, the demonstrations may come and go, but the conditions of African people continue, and we're waiting for the next time. And that what we understand under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party, and the reason that the African People's Solidarity Committee is under the leadership of the party, the reason that the African People's Socialist Party created the African People's Solidarity Committee is to extend the African Revolution into the belly of the beast, for us to be the voice of Black power in white face inside the white community, which is our responsibility to take on. And it's based on an understanding that the chairman, the party tells us over and over again, which is scientific and clear, that the conditions of African people in this country and wherever they are in the world is colonialism. It's colonialism. It is not racism, not the ideas in our heads, not the underpinning, the ideological underpinning of imperialism, but in fact, colonialism, the state, the colonial state that is backed up by the colonizer nation, which is us, and supported by the colonizer nation, and we benefit from it, that this is colonialism and a colonial state that oppresses, kills, imprisons, does everything possible, rapes and plunders African people every single day inside this country. It is not racism. And the fact that this country is built on the assault on Africa, turning of African human beings into commodities for sale, into human work machines, that African human beings were trafficked to the Americas to work to death, and every white person has had the power of life and death over African people, and that there's no way that we can look at that reality and call that racism. That is colonialism, and it's been for the benefit of all white people. All white people sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people, of the genocide of the indigenous people on this land that is stolen from the indigenous people and still belongs to them. And that even as we understand that all white people owe reparations, it is still our responsibility to take on this class struggle that Jesse is talking about. For us, the true anti-imperialist struggle that goes to our ruling class to demand all of the wealth, which they have 50% of the world's wealth in their hands, must be turned back over to the Black Power blueprint, and to the African Revolution, to African people in the form of reparations, not as charity, not as a favor, because it is what is owed. It belongs to African people. So I came to St. Louis a little over a year ago, and I came here from Florida, where I also, of course, was working under the leadership of the Uhuru Movement, the African People's Socialist Party. And I came here to be part of building solidarity for the Black Power blueprint on the north side of St. Louis here, that is building political and economic power in the hands of the African working class in a beautiful way. And we're going to see pictures of it a little bit later, to go into the white community and to be able to build solidarity, build a culture and movement of reparations here in St. Louis. And the thing that I could see is that there is colonialism all throughout this country against African people. And in so many ways, all of the conditions are similar. But there is something extremely raw, extremely brutal about the conditions that African people face here in St. Louis. There's not an attempt to hide it, as you might see in Oakland, California, or in other places where there's this liberal veneer that everything's really okay, even as African people catch hell and gentrification is being imposed on the African community to push them out, which is exactly what is happening here. So, when we look at St. Louis, we see this arch. I don't know if people who don't live here don't know about the arch, but there's this gigantic arch right by the river, the Mississippi River. And this arch is a symbol for white power. It is a symbol for manifest destiny. It is the symbol of the gateway to the West, crossing the Mississippi River, that it's saying that indigenous people have been slaughtered, indigenous people have been subdued, their land has been stolen, and that African people are under severe colonialism. So it's okay for white people to come here. And just to say, in the history of Missouri and St. Louis, that Missouri was actually part of the Confederacy, and the enslavement of African people was legal in the state from 1821, which is when Missouri entered into the Union, quote unquote. And a lot of people fought on this side, a lot of white people fought on the side of the Confederacy, although many fought on the side of the US government. And just to say that what was called the Union and what was called the Confederacy are not any different. You can tear down the Confederate flag, but leave the US flag, which is about the colonial domination of this whole country. It's all imperialism. It's all built on parasitic capitalism, and all must go. And but there was part of Missouri where they had guerrilla warfare during the Civil War, actual guerrilla warfare led by white people who wanted to preserve the Confederacy, and they were called bushwhackers. So that's part of Missouri's history. Also, just to go through this really quickly, that St. Louis is where Dred Scott filed for the right to his, quote, freedom. And it was ruled that Dred Scott, that no African person had any rights that white people had to respect. So this is the city where Dred Scott was. And in 1876, there was the Tilden-Hayes Compromise, which ended the Reconstruction, what was called the Reconstruction period, and returned African people basically to the hands of the states. And they were re-enslaved through convict leasing and through open terror, lynching, other kinds of white mob violence constantly to African people in the South, who began what was called an exodus. And many African people at that time came to St. Louis. So 1876, by 5 years later, in 1881, here in St. Louis, there were 38 privately owned or privately run and funded armed militias in this town. to repress African people. And despite the brutal conditions that African people experienced here, though, they did have a certain amount of economic success and incredible talent, and African leadership was seen here in St. Louis. It was a place where the Garvey movement was very big, very popular, and it had a profound consciousness. And when you see the response in the Black Power blueprint, which flies the African flag in the garden, in the outdoor event space across the street from the Uhuru House on a 50-foot flagpole and a 25-square-foot African flag, and you see the response from the community, from the African community, you recognize that that is in the history here, and the flag came from the Garvey movement, and Garvey was loved and had a high membership in the early part of the 20th century. In 1904, the St. Louis World's Fair was held here, and that was a fair that I think several million people came to from all over the United States and all over the world. And the point of the St. Louis World's Fair was, again, to put forward white power, to put forward the domination of by white people over everybody else on the planet. And in that World's Fair, there were at least 62 human zoos inside that World Fair. There were fenced in exhibits of African people, indigenous people, Filipino people, people from all places, colonized people from all around the world. And it was there to prove that white people were superior. And so this is St. Louis. This is St. Louis. There were racial covenants, which was that white homeowners had to agree that they would never sell their house to an African person. They had to sign that. That was in every neighborhood in the city of St. Louis. In the 1940s, there was a public housing project called Pruitt-Igoe, where the US government and the army dropped and tested chemical warfare by dropping chemicals on this housing project of African people, which sent generations of family members with cancer and all kinds of ramifications of that brutal act. That was, here, St. Louis. And in the 1940s, here in St. Louis, they processed the uranium for the atomic bomb without any kind of precautions or methods to deal with this. They had tons of radioactive waste that they just dumped on the north side, which is now still there and basically in open pits. There's a fire in there that they can't get rid of. It's very near the airport. It's still there. And the wind blows onto Ferguson and other African communities there. And there are cancer clusters and all kinds of health ramifications based on that. In the 1970s, there was the Team 4 plan, which was a plan that was called, that they would use benign neglect, and they would just let buildings in the African community rot. They would not in any way fund the African community. They would not put any money into it. They would just, it was a brutal policy that continues to today, and that the north side of St. Louis is falling down buildings and rotting from the same period. In the 1950s, there were about 900,000 people in the city, and that declined so that today there's 300,000. And even in the last year, another 20,000 people have left, and it's mostly African, because African people are being pushed out by the policies of gentrification and everything else that this system does to African people. So So, you know, we know that that they actually have already in the city, the NGA, which is the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. They're building a new campus of that right in the middle of the African community, the north side of St. Louis, which is one of its main work. And it's a super secret spy agency that's about perfecting the ability of drones to drop bombs on people in the Middle East and Africa and elsewhere around the world, among other brutal things, to perfect GPS and the ability for bombs and other kinds of instruments of war to be absolutely precise. And that we know that, as we've said, the poverty, the conditions of African people on the north side, but also on the south side, are brutal, and that the African community is under daily, not only police and economic attack by the mayor and by the city, but as well by, you know, just by everything, but also by the kind of slander that this, the mayor and the local newspaper uses against African people to slander them every single day. And the politicians of this city are there for one thing only: to take every cent that they can get, put it in their pockets, sell out the people, steal any resources that would go to the African community that were supposedly designated for that, and to use it themselves with impunity to deepen the crisis for the African community here. And I just want to say a couple of examples of that. One of them is Steve Stenger, who was the head of St. Louis County, which was kind of, he was the CEO, but that was like being the mayor of the St. Louis County. And actually last year he had a bill that was up for a vote that lost, that was to consolidate the city and county government together. And it would have made him the head guy in charge for forever. Now this guy, Steve Stenger, I mean, he never even went into his office. He never, you know, he would come in with a baseball cap on for a few hours in shorts and sit around, but he was only about lining his pockets with money and stealing from resources that were supposed to go to the African community. He was sentenced last year to 2 years in a white person's prison. There are a couple of those in the United States where they have tennis courts. It's full of Wall Street, other Wall Street guys who, you know, who got caught doing something, and they all have the Wall Street Journal delivered there. They get to, you know, they have nice food there. They get to do what they want, basically. He was fined about $250,000, and he was arrested. He was charged with what's called pay to play. So it means that he took bribes from people and then he gave them contracts so that, you know, that if they gave him a good campaign donation, then he gave them good contracts. And, you know, one of the mafia guys that he had this pay to play relationship with was also put in jail, but, you know, who knows, he probably won't be in very long. And also his staff, Stenger's staff, the woman, Sheila Sweeney, got probation, and his chief of staff, Bill Miller, got also 15 months in jail. I'm talking about African people go to jail for 30 years to life for nothing, and often not even convicted of a so-called crime. But white people who steal all the resources of the African community get to go into posh surroundings or just probation for, you know, for what they did, which affected the lives of human beings. And so Stenger was only convicted of 3 counts of fraud, but it was not even brought up that he was one of the main players, along with the mayor here, Lyda Crewson, and Sheila Sweeney, who was his chief of staff, that was the CEO of the Economic Development Partnership of the Promise Zone, which is a special program that states on its website, it's a program of the city and county together, that its goal is to deal with the impoverished areas, which of course is the African community here. And that Stenger, Cruson, and Sweeney were the main forces on this. And it said in the paper that Sheila Sweeney used her job as the Economic Development Partnership of the Promise Zone, which dealt with $4.5 billion to disperse, none of you can't even see, practically a paved road on the north side of St. Louis that is full of potholes and houses are falling down, but they had $4.5 billion that they were going to give out in this Promise Zone. But that wasn't mentioned in their court cases. That was not mentioned. They went to jail for this pay to play or quid pro quo. And it had nothing to do with that. I just also want to mention Paul Mckee, who is a white developer who bought up thousands of acres on the north side, including the 99 acres of land that the NGA was on. He brokered that deal, and that the St. Louis alderman gave this guy, he's the key gentrifying force for the north side. The alderman gave him $8 million for north side projects. And over several years, this city government has given Paul Mckee $43 million in tax credits voted on by the aldermen and mayors of St. Louis. So therefore, he is giving them kickbacks to do this without a doubt. And in 2018, Mckee got $2.5 million in tax credits for a building he didn't even buy. So, they're giving it away, they're getting some, and it just goes on and on. In 2018, the city gave out $350 million in tax credits, all to gentrifiers. So this is just a little taste of what goes on in this city. It is raw, it is vicious. $4.5 billion could have gone to the African community to put it into the hands of the African working class, but it went into the pockets of the aldermen, the city government. The lives of African people are affected by that every single day. That's why there is the Black Power blueprint. That is why the African People's Socialist Party has created the program that the political and economic power must be in the hands of African people, not the middle class, not the petty bourgeoisie, not charity, not some NGO or not some nonprofit organization, but in the hands of the African working class themselves. And that we as white people can stand in solidarity with this. We can recognize that we owe reparations, that the moneyed sector, the 1%, owes reparations. Wall Street and all their cronies all throughout the United States making their living today off the backs and on the suffering of the African population must pay. They owe reparations, they must pay in the city, in Wall Street, in Charlotte, North Carolina, wherever, Bank of America, JP Morgan, all of them, they must go. And we must get organized to be under the leadership of this incredible movement of the African working class fighting for liberation, self-determination, and the absolute overturning of a system built on parasitic assault on African people and oppressed people on the planet Earth, built on colonialism, built on genocide, plunder, and rape. We can't live with this. We have to take up our responsibility, go back into the belly of the beast, unleash all those stolen resources, attack and force our ruling class to pay reparations to African people, get organized, join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and stand in genuine solidarity, be part of the future of humanity. When African people are free, oppressed and colonized peoples will be free. This earth will be a place where all human beings can live, no one at the expense of anyone else. So unity through reparations, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairwoman Penny, I just want to express my total unity with that amazing presentation and think that it's really important for us as white people to know the very deep history of colonialism that has shaped everything that we see in the world today. And I just appreciate how you exposed the corruption in St. Louis, as we are the Midwest region and St. Louis is a very significant city ever since, well, just in terms of its history of African resistance and the history of colonialism, but also the Ferguson uprising and just the colonial violence and resistance that we see carried out today. So I just really, really want to appreciate that and again join the call for white people. We have to get organized under the leadership of the African working class, fighting to overturn this oppressive system built on their backs. And that, we recognize that all resistance is good, but there has to be a to what end. So with that being said, I want to again really appreciate Chairwoman Penny for all the research and time that went into that presentation. I think this webinar, which is being recorded on YouTube and Facebook, will be a really powerful resource in this campaign. And now, to keep us on time, I want to introduce our next speaker, to Charo Masimba, who is a member of the African People's Socialist Party, who works in the office of Deputy Chair Ona Zane as the director of the Black Power Blueprint. Charo was born and raised in St. Louis, and as part of his work as a director, he coordinates the Aquaba Banquet Hall in the Uhuru House on West Florissant and Alice, and also the One Africa, One Nation Marketplace across the street from the Uhuru House, which is an incredible place where the African community can sell goods and services, create community commerce, and have a place to just have events and music and just be. He's also an incredibly dynamic community organizer who oversees the NTU Uhuru Movement volunteer program, working with hundreds of volunteers, many who have just come in as a result of the Minneapolis uprising and who contribute to the Black Power Blueprint in 1,000 different ways. And he's also developed deep unity from his family members, and Zayi, who sits on the Black Power Blueprint Steering Committee, his daughter Aaliyah and son Zion, and grandmother Helen Hunt, who volunteers on the Black Power Blueprint Garden Committee. In 2019, he was awarded the Uhuru Movement Comrade of the Year. And as a true African internationalist, his love of African people is expressed in his concrete dedication to building Black power. So I just want to turn it over now to Charo Masimba.
All right, Uhuru, I want to just extend a profound thank you and recognition of the profound work of the Uru Solidarity Movement led by our last presenter, Chairwoman Penny Hess, under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Chairwoman Penny Hess has been fighting a fierce struggle since 1976. So I want to really acknowledge that. I want to also acknowledge Jesse Neville, who opened up for us in his profound leadership as the chair of the Uru Solidarity Movement. And then Casey Mckee, who is working on the ground here in St. Louis, organizing in the white community, leading the social media work under the leadership of the Black Power Blueprint in the white community. So I just want to extend a profound recognition of this team and also of this campaign to make Wall Street pay reparations to African people. And of course, all of this is happening under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, chaired by Omali Yeshitela and the National Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party. And I want to extend a profound recognition of the leadership of Deputy Chair Ona Zane Yeshitela, my direct leadership, who we cannot say enough about, but who came here to St. Louis and built the Black Power Blueprint in a real concrete fashion. So I think this is a profound question of, make Wall Street pay reparations, and expressed in the context of this question of the Delmar Divide in the city of St. Louis. So as was stated, Delmar is a literal thing. You know, it's a symbol, it's an analogy, but it's a very literal thing that's living today. You have this boulevard that on one side, I don't know if it was said, on one side, you have home values, for example, upwards of $310,000 in value. And then immediately on the other side of this one street, this one boulevard, home values drop drastically. And the statistics say 78,000 is the average home value, but I think that's a bit high. I think those numbers are skewed in some way, because you see this profound level of poverty. You know, when we first started to look at this question of housing, there were 25,000 vacant and abandoned buildings and properties throughout North St. Louis. And this agency that has been created as a bank, right, holds at this point nearly 12,000 properties. And Africans cannot even get access to these properties while we live in extreme poverty. 30% of the population living off an average of $5 a day. You know, and this is not just St. Louis, because we see this incredible number in Boston, where white people have $247,000 in median wealth, while African people have $8. We also have heard this incredible statistic that it would take African people 228 years to catch up to acquire the amount of wealth that white people have today. And so we are taking on this question of reparations. We're taking on this question of Black power, because we don't have 228 years to suffer just to catch up with the amount of wealth that white people have today. We're not going to do it. So we've advanced the struggle for reparations. The African People's Socialist Party has said that reparations is a revolutionary demand. It's a function of the revolution. We are not looking for some kind of welfare check, some kind of payoff. We want the people to be able to have power. We want the land to go to the peasants, the land to go to the workers, for the indigenous people to be able to have control over the land that is now occupied by settlers. And we have to be able to say that white people in this country are settler colonizers. And then the whole basis of all the contradictions we see is centered around this fact that they are colonizers, that you have a social system that is a parasitic social system, where if you have a parasite that attaches itself to the body of another people, that is the whole configuration of the entire social system, not only of the St. Louis, not only of the US, but the entire world. And we call that relationship colonialism. A foreign and hostile entity, a parasite, has attached itself to the body and blood of another people. And the only way to change that relationship is to detach that parasite, and the people must have power to do it, because the parasite will not do it willingly. That is a struggle against colonialism. And we are not struggling against racism. The parasite may have racist ideas, but the fact is those racist ideas are created for the parasite to be able to justify to himself and to the world why he is living off of another people. So the struggle then is not to be diverted by struggle by the parasite's names that they call you, or the ideas in his head, or the myth that he would create about who you are. But the struggle is against the fact that he has attached himself to you, she has attached herself to you, and to detach this parasite from you once and for all. So that is what this whole struggle is about. And so we've made this call for Black power. And we saw yesterday the chair of the African People's Socialist Party, our chairman, Omali Yeshitela, made this, or was that today? He came out yesterday and made this serious declaration that we are not fighting to get people to accept that Black Lives Matter, that we are struggling for Black power, not for Black Lives Matter. So so this struggle that we are making, we have to clearly define it. We cannot just leave it up to the African middle class, the petty bourgeoisie, the white corporations that are increasingly defining this struggle in order to save the social system from ultimate revolution. We cannot leave it up to them. We cannot leave it even up to the uninformed masses who don't have the organization and ideological clarity to be able to define the struggle. We are saying that the struggle must be defined by us, must be defined by those who have organization and advanced revolutionary theory. And we have to say that the struggle is about power. The struggle, we also have said that we must go beyond mere protest. And it's not just a matter of choosing one form of struggle or another, because we believe in using every form of struggle. But the question is, to what end, or what are you struggling for? This is what the African People's Socialist Party, this is what the Black Power Blueprint is made to be able to answer this question: to what end are we struggling? So this is what this campaign is about, and I think it's a profound campaign that we are a part of. We saw, what we see today is reminiscent of the 1960s. We haven't, I don't believe, seen a period since the 1960s comparable to what we're beginning to see now. And in the 60s, we had this incredible struggle again for power, because at one juncture, at one point, you had a Black middle class civil rights leadership that had formed an alliance and became a dependent social force on sections of the white ruling class struggling for civil rights, and so that they can occupy primarily certain political positions, needing Africans to be able to vote them into power. And so you had this class struggle where they could be satisfied, the African petty bourgeoisie could be satisfied with these political appointments and having their names in magazines and simple payoffs, but the masses of the people's conditions did not change. And so we saw this struggle emerge, this eruption, this call for Black power, and this struggle for the masses of African workers to have power over our own lives emerge, but that was crushed. And the US underwent this violent campaign of intimidation, assassination, imprisonment to wipe out the people's struggle for revolutionary change, for Black power. And it was something that happened not only in the US, but all throughout the world. And so they engaged, they implemented this whole campaign we call counterinsurgency. Insurgent people, people struggling for power, they're called insurgents. And so the US implemented this process called counterinsurgency. It became an art and a science. They even take the mechanisms that they use to oppress a people, and they try to quantify those and be able to add numerical values to the things that they do to us, so that they can then measure it and identify precisely what works in terms of suppressing a population that does not want to be the host to a parasite anymore. So we saw this this whole campaign of assassination and imprisonment. And what we're saying now today is that as we approach a similar period, we have to be armed with the capacity to know what we are struggling for and an organization to be able to carry it out. Right now, we see forces trying to co-opt this struggle, this incredible uprising that didn't just, in the recent period, didn't just begin with the response to the murder of George Floyd. We saw it profoundly expressed in 2014 when the African people of Canfield Drive and Ferguson rose up in response to the cruel murder of Mike Brown. But now you see all of these forces trying to co-opt this question. You see the Democrats and Bernie Sanders, who are calling themselves some version of a socialist. You see them adopting this question of reparations. You see the 99% crowd who pretend that somehow white people are similar and identical and share an identical struggle with the masses of the people of the world who live in utter poverty. So everybody wants to get in front of this question during this volatile period. And right now, it's important that we take on this question of Black power, and we understand who we're struggling against and why we're struggling against them. We see right now corporations all throughout the US who are essentially doing what we see the police do when they kneel on one knee? They're offering money, corporations that is, offering money and programs, and they're trying to redefine the struggle as a struggle against racism, as a struggle for racial equity, as a struggle for diversity, hoping to mute the calls for power and to prevent any kind of real struggle against colonialism. So it's critical that we define the struggle and that we understand what it is that we're struggling against. We're struggling against a foreign and hostile entity that lives at the expense of the vast majority of the people of the planet. We want to remove this parasite. We're not struggling against racism. We will not be satisfied with mere calls of Black Lives Matter, which does nothing to inform the people about what it is we need to do to take power over our own lives. So that's one aspect of it. And you know, we've seen also Trump, you know, go and retire to a bunker in fear that the rising people might even overtake the White House. We saw the military, well, people may not know, but the military, sections of the military also during the previous height of COVID, also retired to bunkers as they were praying that the military forces did not experience an outbreak of COVID. And in fact, you saw this one Navy commander and the person who put it out in the media about these, the Navy sailors who had gotten an outbreak of COVID on this Navy ship. You saw him reprimanded, not because of what was said to the sailors when he criticized the sailors, but he was reprimanded because it made it to the media and it might signal to the masses of the uprising people all around the world where the US military is occupying colonized people everywhere on the planet, that the US military is vulnerable. And so they have this whole social system that is always teetering on the edges. That is in severe crisis right now, and they're doing everything they can to figure out how to hold this thing together. And what we have to do is we cannot let any social force, anybody, come in and save the social system from decline. We want it to topple over so that the people of the world can be free. So that's what we are up to. And when we say Black Power, when we talk about the Black Power Blueprint, it is a struggle for the masses of the people to have power of our own lives and to see the end of a social system called colonial capitalism that's responsible for sucking the blood, the resources, the land, the labor, all of the surplus value of everything everybody in the world produces for the benefit of the white ruling class and the whole white society. So that's what we're up against. And so, you know, St. Louis, there's this notion called the Delmar Divide, as I said. And it's important that we do look at the history of St. Louis, you know, and extract what we can extract from that history to see some of the contradictions, although they're universal. But St. Louis, you know, home of the indigenous people, was first colonized by the French, who then, because of the incredible revolution of the African people of Haiti, were forced to sell for almost nothing the land to Thomas Jefferson and this new force that called themselves Americans, this new system that called itself the US, that had finally broken apart from its colonial partners, Britain, to form their own private colony. So they then purchased this land from the French and in 1804. And so we saw Lewis and Clark, the first US colonizers, come to this part of the world that we refer to as St. Louis. And Lewis and Clark, we are taught in history, were some kind of explorers. But the fact is, they were part of the US military commissioned by Thomas Jefferson to undergo a reconnaissance mission, which is a mission that people in the military undergo to be able to map out territory so that the invading forces coming behind them can understand the terrain. So they built a fortress, and I say they, but the fact is we know that it would have been Africans who were forced to build a fortress right outside St. Louis at Bell Fountain. And this fortress was used, of course, to wage campaigns of war on the indigenous people, the Osage and whatnot, and they held Africans in enslavement in order to do it. So this fortress was then eventually shut down, and the operations moved to a street that we refer to today as Arsenal. And we call it Arsenal because it was literally an arsenal. So after the fortress was closed down, then they moved operations and created this arsenal where they just stored military weapons to perfect this ability to murder and take more and more and more and more land from the indigenous people, so that they could, of course, have land that they can then use the labor of Africans to build an economy for themselves. And so, as was stated earlier by Chairwoman Penny Hess, this gateway to the art, this gateway arch that stands as a monument of white power, of white power colonialism, is in fact a gateway. It's called the gateway to the West, but in fact, it's a gateway to Western imperialism. It's a symbol of a gateway to westward colonialism, as the U.S. would expand more and more, killing more and more indigenous people, bringing more and more African people from the continent of Africa, crisscrossing us all over the planet, and eventually bringing us here to serve as slaves for white colonizers. So this arsenal then evolved into a mapping agency. When hot air balloons were created, the reconnaissance work could be done from the air. They could use cameras and pictures to look out and to be able to see what's happening in the world. And this evolved into the mapping agency that exists here in St. Louis today, where I think 3,000 or so people are employed here. And this is the predecessor. This agency is to become, has been funded now to be expanded into what was discussed earlier, to become the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. This agency that will map out targets for US colonizers, US imperialists, who want the resources of everybody on the planet, to be able to identify people who might resist that incursion, and so that they can then drop bombs, drop drones, send militiamen, military, Navy SEALs, and whatnot to occupy the land and resources of everybody around on the planet. So this is an aspect of the history of St. Louis: constant oppression, armed oppression to maintain white power. We saw the first African cities that emerged here. Some emerged directly from plantations, even from the French colonizer plantations before the US. Emerged African cities where African people tried to rebuild a life for ourselves, tried to find a way to figure out how to feed, clothe, and house ourselves to be able to have a life. We see city after city then dispersed. So in Clayton, the prosperous white seat of St. Louis County government was originally an African city, but Africans were dispersed, gentrified, pushed out of that community, and now it is a bustling community that provides wealth and prosperity for all white population. We saw the African city of town of Mill Creek Valley that was concentrated in the central section of the city. We saw that community destroyed, African people pushed out, white people came in. And what I'm saying is that these were the original Delmar Divides, is what I'm saying. African people were not centered in North St. Louis at one point. At one point, we were centered in the central corridor, and we've over time been pushed further and further north as each year, each decade, the Delmar Divide goes further and further north. So these were the original Delmar Divides. And in fact, some people are calling what we refer to as the Delmar Divide, or calling it the Page Divide, Page Boulevard, because now many Africans have been pushed further north. And so Delmar is not even the divide anymore. It is Page Boulevard that is becoming the new divide. And so white people have this history of pushing African people out, pushing the indigenous people out. We see this whole history of, white people, as was stated earlier, have created 90-something municipalities, nearly 90 municipalities all throughout St. Louis. And we grew up not knowing that it was something odd about driving, 2 miles, you're in one municipality, then all of a sudden you're in another municipality. So it seems like 1,000 feet, and then you're in another municipality. And then the thing is that each one of these municipalities had a special way of extracting money from African people, primarily centered around them pulling us over, ticketing us, towing our cars, forcing us to rack up fines and fees, and to be able to forcing us to miss work, imprisoning us, locking us up, women if they're pregnant. But each one of these municipalities, which were created by white people who wanted to branch off from African communities so that they can have their own schools, their own police departments, and so that they can separate themselves, the colonizer, from the colonized. It was a new Delmar Divide. Each one of these 90 municipalities, a Delmar Divide, where white people want to separate themselves so that the colonizers can then distinguish themselves from the colonized, and they can continue the parasitic extraction of all of the resources of African people. So we would get pulled over, and each one of these municipalities made 70, 80, whatever percent of all of the income, government income in that municipality, from ticketing African people. So each one of them had a courthouse, and on any given day, you go to the courthouse and you see African people lined up. And so then you get, African people, we're losing our jobs, we're getting further and further into debt. We are jailed on a regular basis. Now we have, warrants, we can't pay the fines, anything. And so they create this whole trap of pushing African people into the jail system, and then eventually into the prison system, because this whole setup is structured for the white community to find 1,000 different ways to extract resources, to extract whatever they can from the African community, to bleed the African community dry. So there's a Delmar Divide in 1,000 different places, in 1,000 different ways, as colonizers have always found a way to distinguish their interests from ours, to create economies over here that thrive off of exploiting African economies over there. That's what the Delmar Divide is. And it's a divide that has its origins in Africa. It is a divide that divides the white colonial police state from the African working class, that exploits it, that it exploits and oppresses. It is a colonial divide that had its origins, that it goes back to the 1960s, when this counterinsurgency tactic was imposed on African people for the benefit of the colonizer, to ensure that we would never rise up, we would never take back our resources, we would never identify our own interests, we would never struggle, we would never create unity, we would never create organization, we would never fight for power. Another Delmar Divide, to make sure that we would never know our own interests, we would never have the capacity to fight in our own interests. So that's the history, that's some of the history of what we call the Delmar Divide. And I think it's important for us to also recognize that this whole notion of Wall Street, which was a literal wall, was another Delmar Divide. You had African people enslaved in New York, in Manhattan, on what is called Wall Street today, forced to build this wall so that colonizers could keep indigenous people on the other side of the wall, again, so that you can maintain a divide, so that the colonizers can live a life of luxury and plenty. They could create a business district that was predicated, built upon, codified the capacity for them to extract the resources, the land, the labor, the blood, the sweat, the tears of the indigenous people and African people. So it was a literal wall that was built. That's where it gets the name Wall Street. So Wall Street was the original Delmar Divide, if you will. It is a colonial divide. And that's the thing that we have to be able to get across. It is a colonial divide. It is a colonial divide. The purpose is to divide the loot between the oppressor and the oppressed. That's the thing. And that's critical for us to say that and distinguish it from racism. Why? Because as I stated earlier, you can, colonialism is something material, something that you can identify. You can identify the parasite, you can identify the host, you can identify how the parasite attaches himself to the host, and you can identify, if you have the theory, if you have the organization, you can develop the capacity to identify how it is that you can extract the parasite from the host, and you can identify what new social system you can create to replace it. With racism, it does not give you the ability to understand any of that. Everything is interpreted. Everything white people do, you interpret as some kind of subjective hatred that somehow motivates every white people without any kind of material interest, without having any kind of relationship to, you know, what they get in the real world. They just are motivated by hate year after year, century after century, to maintain the social system. That's an irrational explanation. And, you know, some people have resorted to other explanations. But when we say colonialism, we can identify the social system. We can also identify the social system that we are creating. And you can't say that with racism, because you can't identify the social system you're destroying. You cannot identify the social system you're creating. The best you can do is say, we want to create some kind of world based on justice or something, but nothing that you can apply any kind of science to. And we are struggling for the capacity to understand the real world as it exists, so that we can know how it is, we can change our conditions, and we can free ourselves from 600 years of slavery. And then thus we can help work in alliance with everybody else in the world, the masses of oppressed people, colonized people of the world, to help free the entire world so that we can create a new social system and humanity can live a whole different existence. So, what else? So we are engaged in these real concrete struggles right here in St. Louis. You know, a microcosm of all the struggles that African people are engaged in all around the world. Just recently, for example, we saw Enterprise, the state legislature, give a $41 million tax break to Enterprise, a corporation that makes an average of $70 million a day. But it's also a corporation that then takes that revenue of $70 million a day, and it has to flip that revenue to make more revenue, so it invests in prison systems. And we have nearly every person, I think with the exception of 2 older persons, voted to give this corporation, this prison corporation, $41 million so that they can have a soccer stadium that will push more African people out, drive up the property values, so that and continue gentrification. And the thing about capitalism is that capitalism has to do it because capitalism is not just about making a profit. Capitalism is about taking all the profit and taking it from colonized people. So if Enterprise made $70 million a day in 2020, then in 2021, if they make $70 million a day, then the likelihood is that their share price will drop because their competitors will make $71 million a day. So the share price will fall. So they can't just make 70. They can't make the same thing next year that they made last year. Even if they make, let's say they make $80 million in revenue in 2021, that still can't be satisfactory to them because their competition may make $90 million a day, and because of the relative inability, the relative rise in how much they made, revenue increase, their share price will still fall, so they will still lose money. So capitalism requires that the capitalists take everything, and they have to rape you, and they have to do it mercilessly because they're in competition with other capitalist colonizers. And so this is why in the city of St. Louis, you see 25,000 vacant and abandoned buildings. This is why you see 30% of the population living off of $5 a day, African population primarily, because colonial capitalism has extracted everything from us. This is why capitalists, colonizer capitalists would put drugs into the African community deliberately, chemical warfare, to ensure that African people never develop the capacity to struggle against this, because they have to take everything off the table in order to survive. So you have these corporations centered in St. Louis, the CEO or founder of Square and Twitter. You have this capitalist parasite, Paul Mckee, General Motors, Ameren Electric, Centene, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. All of these entities are working with the mayor, working with the governor, not only of St. Louis City, but St. Louis County, to merge the county so that they can have an expanded territory, to extract tax money, to set up businesses, to exploit the labor of African and other people. You see this whole white ruling class working also with the police union to ensure that the white ruling class can create a new market that allows them to exploit African people in a new way. So that's a critical thing that we're struggling against. So what does that look like in concrete terms? It means that right now, the mayor has, and the state legislator has fought to pass this bill that will allow St. Louis City to hire people from outside of St. Louis to work, St. Louis City to work in the city. Why? So that they can have more police, they can hire more police from outside the African community to come in and police the African community so that they can make it comfortable for gentrifiers. And the fact is, if you have this kind of extreme poverty in the city of St. Louis, you have to ask the question, why is it that nobody wants to work for the police? And this is because it's a colonial entity and the vast majority of the people know it. So you have this struggle to lift this residency requirement. You have this campaign that has been waged on the African community to reduce the number of wards from 28 wards to 14 wards, so that this ruling class, this parasitic class, can then have to rely on fewer alderpersons to be able to appeal to control, to carry out their own interests, to dilute the political power of the African working class. You have this attempt to merge the city and the county. I think I said that already. So the African community in 1,000 different ways is just under attack. And this is the social system. And then on top of that, you have this African petty bourgeoisie sellout class, that a dependent social force that relies on a relationship with this white ruling class for their existence, occupying most of the political seats, occupying most of the social service agencies, which continuously sell out the struggle for African people to actually have power of our own lives. Many are calling for things like calling for a Black Wall Street, where they want to get a group of African investors together to appeal to the government, to give them, the local government, to give them land. But there's no struggle for the masses of the people to be able to have power over our own lives, to be able to feed ourselves, to have land so that we can have power over our own lives, so that the workers, the people who produce, can have the surplus value of what they produce turned back to them. That's what we're struggling for, not just for 9 or 10 or 100 Black people to be able to get some property. We're struggling so that the masses of people, the African workers who do all the producing, who have been exploited and colonized, so that we can have a social system where what we produce, what they produce, can come back to us. That is a just social system that we're struggling for. So this is the Black Power Blueprint. I think that my time is probably way over, and I know we'll have pictures, but you have to join this Black Power Blueprint. It's not enough to find some kind of Black Wall Street or find some other way that you can put yourself in the center. And I'm talking to African people, that you put yourself in the center of this, and you can only make a struggle that results in you getting a job, that results in you finding a way to fund your nonprofit. You have to make struggle that puts the masses of African people in the center of the struggle so that we can create a social system where the masses of workers and producers can have the surplus value of what they produce returned to them. That's the Black Power blueprint. That's what we're struggling for. If we want food, we have to take it from the mouth of the colonizer who took it from our mouths. If we want clothing, we have to take it from the colonizer who forces us to produce it for his benefit. If we want housing, we have to take back the land and the housing from the colonizer who acquires it and holds it and makes money at our expense. So Uhuru, I hope I didn't go too long.
Uhuru, that was amazing. I really, really appreciate both of these incredible presentations. I mean, wow. I am just so grateful that I met this movement and can be a part of something real and tangible. And if you are on tonight's webinar and heard these presentations and are moved to take a stand to support a new liberated anti-colonial African economy, that we understand that the only solution to these political problems has to have an economic base in which Black people once again control their own resources, then come and be a part of this. Join something that is bigger than all of us and that is fighting for a future for all of us. Join the Uru Solidarity Movement if you are a white person who says no more genocide in my name. Let's meet our goal tonight. We're not just a talk fest. We want you to join. We want to win 10 new members. We want to raise $1,000 to the Black Power Blueprint that you could submit at uhurusolidarity.org. So to turn this part of the presentation over to Leah, now I'm turning this part of the presentation over to Leah Fifield, who will talk more about the significance of joining USM and helping us raise our goal tonight. Uhuru.
Uhuru, everyone. Thank you so much. So it's an honor to be here. My name is Leah. As Casey said, I am the Reparations Challenge Coordinator for the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And I want to start off by really saluting that incredible presentation by Charo. That was amazing. I also want to salute the presentation by Chairwoman Penny Hess as well, Uhuru. And I want to call on all white people watching tonight. We want to recruit you. We want you to be part of this movement. We want you to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and become card-carrying members like comrades KC, who you see here, and Monica, who is in the next slide. When you become a member of USM, you negate the power of the capitalist parasitic system that oppresses and exploits African and colonized people around the globe. You are one more person that white power cannot count on. Becoming a member of USM is more than just a one-time contribution. It is more than just making a membership payment. It is a commitment to a lifelong stance of reparations and solidarity with the African Revolution. It is also a commitment to our own community, to our white community. It is a way for us as white people to stand on the right side of history. So a question comes up the question comes up, what do we mean by reparations? And we unite with the understanding put forth by the African People's Socialist Party that reparations is not a payoff. It is not a reform or a one-time check from the government. Reparations is solidarity, not charity. It's a function of the revolution. It's about building a liberated anti-colonial African economy in which African and other oppressed peoples have power over their own lives and resources. So all members of USM stand by 3 principles of unity, which are what you see on the screen right now. So number 1, we work under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. This is not a white-led organization. We work under the leadership of African people. African people have a right to lead their own struggle, number 2. And number 3, we work in the white community for reparations. That is what we are tasked with as white people. We need to go into the belly of the beast and return the stolen resources back to African colonized and oppressed peoples. So the party has been building a liberated anti-colonial African economy for decades in the form of economic development initiatives that keep the labor and resources of African people within their community. The most recent expression of this can be seen concretely in the Black Power Blueprint on the north side of St. Louis. So we're going to show a video about the Black Power Blueprint.
The Black Power Blueprint means to me a way that the Black people can have an actual voice in what is going on in their community. It's the way that we can come together and feel proud about what is happening in our community. And the Black Power Blueprint is the way that I believe is going to unite the community as a community that works together for one cause. The Black people, the Black population coming in power with one voice, being able to take back those things and to add on to our lives a better life and a better way.
The Black Power Blueprint, I think, points to giving small businesses or individuals that are of African descent a chance to grow and to empower themselves economically.
Seems like, you know, quote unquote, people that didn't want to be in the city, now they want the city, you know, and so that's pushing us back as a people. And but now, you know, things that were desolate, buildings that were vacant, you know, that you all are buying now and trying to make sure that, you know, something's given back to the city and make the people feel like that they may have something to reach out to in their community. So I think it's very important, you know, that what you all are doing is to give back to the community and helping those that probably wouldn't venture outside of their community to get help. But now they can come right there and get the help that they need. I mean, as far as I understand you all open up a market soon, you know, where you all be selling, you know, fresh vegetables. And it's so important that, you know, even that we begin to eat more healthier, you know, and eat right, and things that some people in the community don't have cars. They can't get everywhere. You know, when I was coming up, we had little grocery stores in the community. We had fruit stands, vegetable stands that was in the community. And those things are almost, you know, they're gone now. But to put it back in, I think it's really awesome.
A flyer going around and a Facebook event going around about this Martin Luther King's Day event that was at the Uhuru house. And I had been hearing about it, the house, but I had never had time because I'm always at work and doing these things. So when I seen that, I was like, okay, I'm off today because I got that holiday off. And so I went to the Uhuru house for that day, for Martin Luther King's Day. And the chairman was speaking that day, and the energy that was there, and the what they was focusing on, and just the information, just like it got me locked and loaded right then, and just the movement and what they was doing with the community and where they were located at. That really touched me. So that's how I became acquainted with the Uhuru house. So it definitely takes our community to be able to make effective change in our community. So what they're focusing on is like building not only political power, but economical power. And that in itself is a movement right there. So just having some people that has knowledge about our history, where we've been and where we could possibly go, like that's powerful. And the fact that they buy it up the block, they're showing people in the neighborhood that you can have more, right?
The Black Power Blueprint to me is very vital. It's very important, mostly because I'm aware of it. And I'm awake to the principles that the Black Power Blueprint stand for. To me, it stands for the economic development and empowerment of Black people and giving us our independence and freedom through those economics and resources that have been starved of our communities for centuries.
It means Black people coming together, and we really need that because we're so ununited at this point, and we really need to unite because all we have is each other at this point. So, yeah.
You guys talked a lot about the Black Power blueprint. What exactly does reparations look like from that organization? When you say reparations, what do we mean? The conversation can mean a lot of different things.
Reparations means repair the damage. That's what reparations mean. What does 400 years of slavery in this country, what does it cost Black people? In addition to our dignity, our culture, and the actual material resources that's been stolen from us. We talking about when we look at these buildings right here on the other side of Central, they go up at the expense of our community that's going down at the same time. Gentrification, pushing people out of our homes, stealing our resources, subprime mortgages that they put, that's resulted in African people losing in just a short period of time more money that came from us during slavery. Reparations mean repairing the damage, one. Two, from our perspective, reparations has to mean negating the power and influence of banks like this by creating our own power and influence. We want those resources to go to Black Power Blueprint because Black Power Blueprint contributes to the development of economic power in the African community. So it's not just feeding into the same process, feeding into the same system.
Uhuru. So that was a short clip of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And the reparations that you pay as a member or as a one-time contribution go directly to the self-determination projects of the African People's Socialist Party that is giving Black people the ability to feed, clothe, and house themselves. After the Ferguson Rebellion in 2014, the chairman and the African People's Socialist Party went into Ferguson and not just protested, but went beyond protest and built what is known today as the Black Power Blueprint, a Black self-determination project repairing the damage done by literally repairing buildings block by block and turning them into institutions by and for the people. This is about economic and political power to govern their lives free from terror. As we can see from the video, this project has clearly had a deep impact on the community. The struggle for African self-government demands an economic foundation. So that's why the party says true solidarity is reparations, because it's an anti-colonial demand. Unlearning our racism does nothing to challenge the parasitic economy exploiting African people every day, but reparations deprives the parasite of its resources and strengthens the African anti-colonial struggle. So in the pictures here, we see the renovation of the Uhuru House Community Center. And in the next slide, we see the demolition of the building that couldn't be saved, that's right across the street from the Uhuru House. And instead, there's this outdoor event space that has been created by it, and the installation of the red, black, and green flag. So the building of the marketplace and this outdoor event space is right across the street from the Uhuru House. And then in the next slide, we see a closer view of the beautiful outdoor event space with the red, black, and green flag again, and the Mr. Gary Brooks Community Garden. So this flag that we see in this picture, it was actually stolen recently. So in the dead of night, cowardly white nationalists stole this flag. And what happened is this flag is such a source of pride for the community that the community responded in a very powerful way and immediately raised the donations to replace the flag, almost immediately. And then in the next picture, we have the future projects which are underway. The African People's Education and Defense Fund purchased an old boathouse earmarked for renovation to build the Uhuru Jiko Kitchen, Bakery, and Cafe. And then next, the African People's Education and Defense Fund also purchased this fourplex building, which is earmarked to create housing for formerly incarcerated people coming into the African Independence Workforce Program. So this is called the Black Power Blueprint, emphasis on blueprint for a reason. This is what the world can look like when the Black community controls their own resources. And we can be a part of that world by returning those stolen resources back to the Black Power blueprint so that it can be built in every city. So tonight we have 2 goals. We are going to reach 2 goals. One is getting 10 new members to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And then we want to raise $1,000 to support the work of the African People's Socialist Party and the Black Power Blueprint, because we want this blueprint in every city across the country. So we need everyone watching that has not become a member yet to step up and stand in solidarity with African liberation. If you join tonight, your first month's membership counts towards our $1,000 goal that we have tonight. And of course, you're welcome and encouraged to make an additional contribution towards tonight's goal. So in order to become a member, it's really simple. All you do is go to uhurusolidarity.org and click on the red button that says Become a Member. And you can join at one of the many sustainer levels that we have. To make a one-time contribution to our goal of $1,000 tonight, instead you'll click on the button that says Pay Reparations. And you can let us know in the chat if you are becoming a member and or making a contribution, and we will announce that later. So another way to return stolen resources is you can also send a check or money to P.O. Box 3630, St. Petersburg, Florida, 33731, and that information is also available at uhurusolidarity.org. So you can become a member by writing or sending money in. Either of those ways work. So we need every white person watching tonight to make a commitment to return the stolen resources that have been hoarded in our community, resources that benefit all white people. We need everyone watching to pay reparations tonight and get us to our $1,000 goal and empower the liberated anti-colonial economy that the African People's Socialist Party is building. The more this anti-colonial economy is built, the weaker capitalism becomes. And I know that destroying capitalism is something that we can all get on board with. So if you are still on the fence about joining, I just want to real quickly tell you why I joined. Before I joined USM, I was really driven to create some kind of positive change in the world, but I was feeling fairly directionless in that desire. I found myself being pulled into several different struggles, kind of single issue movements, things like climate chaos or political corruption or the prison system. And I found it kind of dizzying and in fact, somewhat depressing to be pulled in so many directions and still not feeling like I was making any kind of impact at all. The world around me was not changing in any way. So my friend told me about the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and along with that, the political understanding that if we as white people unite under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party and support revolutionary progress, that we are going to be able to solve those single issue problems. These problems will continue to exist under capitalism and colonial domination. We are not going to be able to solve the planet as long as capitalism exists. Only overthrowing colonialism will get to the root of these problems, and only then can we move towards a world where no one lives their life at the expense of others. So for us as white people to take a stand and be in opposition to this nasty social and economic system, we have to get organized. We have to join a revolutionary movement under the leadership of colonized and African people. So if you're feeling tired of feeling like you're getting nowhere with your political struggles and you want to make a real impact, you have to join USM. And really that's why I joined, because this is the only movement that is making daily revolutionary progress towards destroying capitalism, imperialism, and colonialism. So I implore all of you to join. We need to make our goal of $1,000 tonight. Write in the chat after you have either joined or made your contribution. And I really salute all of the new comrades that are going to be joining tonight, and Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Comrade Leah. I really appreciate this comrade who is right there in Minneapolis, who has been going out to the incredible demonstrations that have been happening there to win white people to unite with the leadership of the African working class and the worldwide African revolution. I know that our event is just a little bit over time, but I do want to see if anybody has any questions or comments that they want to give or to say why they're joining. You know, this is your organization. We are a people's movement, and that is what you get when you have the leadership of the African working class. Just the most compassionate, putting the people first, fighting for everyone to be free. And that is what the Black Power movement has always struggled for. So I would love if people have questions to turn them over to our speakers. And maybe if you're still mulling it over or wasn't sure about what was going on with the chat, it should be on now, or you can put your comments in the Q&A. And I see that we're also going to shout out all the members and donors before we close out. So people should definitely keep joining and donating. Keep joining and donating. We have a comment from Paula, who said, "Thank you for all the amazing information. I joined as a member because Black and Brown power matters and reparations matter. So grateful to have found the leadership of USM." Uhuru. And Paula joined. So thank you so much, my new comrade. How do we get involved with the actions that start on July 18th? Great question. Tomorrow, there is a meeting at 3 p.m. Central for this campaign. We are hosting a mass meeting to consolidate plans to unleash the Make Wall Street Pay Reparations campaign on the streets throughout the US. So join us, call in tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central or 4 p.m. Eastern, and you can get plugged in. And if you're not able to make that meeting, you should get in touch with your regional coordinator. If you're in the Midwest, that would be me. And if you've joined, we have your information. So Paula, I'm assuming that you are interested. So we will definitely let you know, send you the link to call into tomorrow's meeting. And if you can't make it, we'll make sure that you get the info that you need. Chairwoman Penny, did you want to say anything? You are on mute.
Uhuru. Yes, well, thank you, KC and Leah. And I just really wanted to salute that powerful presentation by Charo Masimba that was just gave so much history, but also the depth of the question of colonialism and why we must become members, why we have to take this on, that this is African internationalism. And that is the political understandings of the African People's Socialist Party that sees the world through the eyes of the African working class and oppressed and colonized peoples around the world. We see the eyes we see the world as the subjects of history. We write the history. But what is happening now is that the struggle of African and colonized peoples are rising up and putting out their own narrative. That's even in why all of these statues and monuments to colonialism here and all around the world have to be torn down, because the narrative of the African working class and the oppressed is crashing to the surface and overturning this white myth and lie. And it is very exciting. This is liberation for us, if we could even say that this gives us a future and lets us be on the forward side of history. This is how we turn loose our whiteness. And the thing that Chairman Omali Yeshitela says is that the African working class is not just explaining the world, but changing it. Once we have the understandings that we heard to Charo Masimba put out tonight, that we heard Jesse Neville talk about tonight, that once we see this, we can't unsee it anymore. We can't unsee it. This tells us how the world really is. It forces us to take off our blinders and join and take responsibility to go back into the belly of the beast, unleash the stolen resources, turn it back over as reparations to African people. So get organized, join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Reparations is a positive stand for us. It is not punitive. It is the way that we rectify our relationship that has been as the oppressor and the colonizer, as Charo put out so well, that's benefited from and participated in the suffering of African people and everybody else on the planet. So this is an incredible thing to be able to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. Uhuru.
Uhuru, I unite Chairwoman Penny, and we are coming up to the end of our event. So I just want to again thank everybody so much. I want to announce that we got 3 new members tonight.
All
We have
right.
Gordana, Paula, and Jennifer. And if you were on this webinar and are not yet a member and still mulling it over, we have orientations multiple times a week to learn a little bit more. And we just want to really encourage you to take this stand in solidarity with all oppressed and colonized people, because when we unite with reparations to the African Revolution, that puts us in unity with the anti-colonial struggles all over the world. It means we're in solidarity with the Palestinians, the Venezuelans, the people of Afghanistan, the Vietnamese, everybody struggling against white power. We want to join. So really shout out our new members. I also want to thank Rainer Goldberg, who gave $50 tonight. We have Penny Hess, who put in $75 to our amazing speaker. Jackson put in $5. Jesse Neville, Ron Hudson, Mitch, Johan, Pete, Lisa, Leah, and Pam. Thank you so much all for your contributions. We really, really appreciate you. I would read, more details, but we're running out of time. So I just want to close with some announcements. I already spoke to the event or the meeting that's tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. And we would love for you to come and learn more about this campaign and get ready to protest outside of Bank America next Saturday. Also, this weekend is the African National Women's Organization Black Women's Convention. So that's Saturday, July 11th, starting at 11 a.m. And I think going to about 4 p.m. And then on Sunday, same times, 11 to 4, that's Eastern time, so 10 to 3 Central. It's a gathering of poor and working class Black women who believe that a better world is possible. The purpose of the convention is to encourage discussions and workshops that will challenge and excite and organize African working class women under their own leadership. And everybody in solidarity with African women's liberation should be there and is encouraged to register and attend. And you can find the information at theburningspear.com/events. I'll put that in the chat. And then also this Sunday is Omali Taught Me, a special Sunday study that the chairman does every Sunday to go really in depth into all these questions. They're really incredible. And this Sunday is very special because it's a continuation of a special series that has featured the Mexican liberation organization Unión del Barrio, which has been working with the party for over 30 years. So this week, the chairman will be joined by representatives from the African National Women's Organization, President Yejide Oronmila, and African National Women's Organization Occupied Azania, or South Africa coordinator Connie Hutchinson, as well as Unión del Barrio's Women's Commission, Adriana Simone, Erica Rubio, and Desiree. So we're very excited. Tune in on Sunday. Go like Chairman Omali Yeshitela on Facebook and you'll get notified when he goes live. So I just again want to thank and appreciate everybody for contributing to our goal tonight. Again, go to uhurusolidarity.org and become a member and/or pay reparations as we continue the struggle for reparations to African people and turning the world right side up and building the Black Power blueprint. And I think that tonight we raised $870. So we're just 130 short. This is a huge victory. So if anyone wants to put in that last 130 or 2 people want to do 65 each, you're definitely welcome to do that and encouraged to do that. So go to uhurusolidarity.org and help us meet our goal. And again, I want to thank our incredible speakers, Chairwoman Penny Hess, to Charo Masimba, Jesse Neville, who plugged the Make Wall Street Pay Reparations campaign at the beginning that this webinar has been building. So I want to close with a chant that we like to do, which is unity through reparations. Uhuru, thank you everybody.